Stormbreath, Butcher of the Horde, Burmaz, and Rabble-Master. They're all at 3 and above. And as far as for spells that cost less than 3 mana, it's really just cards like Lightning Strike, Thoughtseize.
Yep.
And John will be on the play. The players are going to trade a couple temples. And that is something we've seen with these 3 color decks, is that their turns 1 and 2, I mentioned this a bit yesterday, is really all set up, whether or not it's temples or cards like Sylvan Caryatid for the green decks. They don't really start playing impactful cards until turn 3 in the format.
Only the monocolor beatdown decks are the ones trying to capitalize on that sort of thing, at least right now. And they did not have a great performance in this tournament.
Second tap land here for John Goss, just going to be a tri-land.
All trivia questions are supposed to be GP or link.
Nomad Outpost. Jadine does get one of the turn 2 plays in her deck, though. She has Seeker of the Way. It's one of the 3 creatures that she runs here in this tempo, this kind of burn aggro hybrid.
And the first test for John, I think he has to prioritize not taking any damage off of any creature if he can avoid it.
Does play a set of Lightning Strike. Outside of that, he doesn't have a 2 mana way to get rid of the Seeker, but he may have a 3 mana way. Instead, he's just going to make Goblin Rabble-Master, but that'll do okay here.
It's not shabby, but you know what is most likely to happen here is Jadine will kill this and get in the first shot of the game.
Yeah, even if she doesn't have the spell to kill it, you'd have to think that she's just attacks into this anyway.
And if I'm John, I'm looking to trade. I think John has to be the control deck in this matchup through and through.
He certainly has the better creatures at the end of the game.
Yeah, at the top of his curve is just so excellent here. Burmaz, Butcher of the Horde, Stormbreath Dragon. All high quality threats.
All right, Chivalry for Jadine. She's going to have a 3 mana spell here. We'll see if it is that kill spell, or if she's going to add another threat to the board. Goes to 19, and it's going to be Mantis Rider. Both creatures swing. She's going to offer the trade for Rabble-Master. And if you were saying you think John needs to take this.
Unless his hand's especially aggressive, I think that he needs to make a block here.
An interesting setup here. A Seeker of the Way in a Rabble-Master mirror would be a pretty valuable card in its lifelink. But then again, Rabble-Master is also a pretty valuable card.
Both cards are very good, but the bigger thing to me is just John's life total. Going down to 15, it's a big hit to take.
We'll see, John in the tank on this one. Yeah, Rabble-Master does do a pretty good job of racing, but he's going to go ahead and trade it with Seeker of the Way. Just take 3 and go to 17.
It's not pretty, but I think this is the way that John needs to play these games.
Completely agree. One thing of note, if you look at John Goss's deck, is that yesterday we saw, especially in Abzan decks, a lot of players, in order to play 3 colors, were taking a lot of damage off their mana base. John's gone the opposite way with his deck. He has a lot of temples, a lot of tri-lands, and actually has a mana base that does relatively little damage to himself.
People are still figuring out exactly how they want their mana bases constructed here. John's is very clean. I mean, it's cumbersome. He has a lot of lands that come into play tapped, but he is keeping his life total high, and that's a huge asset in this matchup.
While Jadine's tapped out, John takes his turn to play a tap land and to Hero's Downfall, that Mantis Rider. So he is protecting his own life total. Jadine has a 3rd creature in Goblin Rabble-Master. That'll get a point of damage in. But John is still at 16 right now.
Very intrigued by Jadine's list. Only 12 creatures and 4 copies of Titan's Strength. Never really seen something like that before.
It reminds me a lot. I mean, the last time we saw blue-white-red be really good in Standard was when we had cards like the Snapcaster Restoration Angel style decks. And those kind of fit the similar mold, right? You have some sort of mid-teens number of creatures backed up by Disruption.
Yeah.
John's turn. He's going to play Sarkhan the Dragon Speaker, and look at the conservative style he has to play it. Rather than making it into a 4/4 flyer, he simply -3s it to kill Goblin Rabble-Master, and aware of the fact that this Goblin token will be able to finish off his Planeswalker.
But again, just try to trade 1-for-1 as much as possible, keep his life total high, and take the sting out of Jadine's burn spells.
Yeah, really like the way he's playing it. Jadine does use the Goblin token to take out Sarkhan, but John is still at 16 as we enter the 6th turn.
And this has to be counted as a success thus far for John. At a pretty high life total, Jadine's board effectively empty.
And now we get to see what it is she's holding. Thoughtseize here from Goss. He sees a bit of a bullet he dodged here. There was one of Jadine's 2 copies of Sarkhan in her hand. She did not hit the 5th lens to cast it. But some concern for John, as we see 16 points of burn in her hand, a pair of Stoke the Flames and a pair of Jeskai Charms.
And this is the issue with the matchup from John's side of the table. He doesn't have a lot to interact with this. Not a ton of life gain in this deck. And, even the innocuous seeming hit he took from one Mantis Rider and a token or whatever has led him into this spot.
Yeah, right now she has more burn than he has life points. So he's going to play Butcher of the Horde here. And this is one of the best things he can be doing. I was going to say the sources of life gain in his deck are these 4 copies of Butcher of the Horde and the 2 copies of Sorin Solemn Visitor.
Yeah.
And he's going to need life gain because Jadine has, more burn than John has life points right now.
He needs to produce a lot of copies of this card, though. A problem from this spot is, this warrants a response because if he untaps and is able to give it lifelink somehow, well, Jadine's in a lot of trouble. But even his Stormbreath Dragons don't warrant a response. Jadine can race that pretty easily with the burn spells left over in her hand.
Yeah. You think this will probably get a Stoke the Flames or a Jeskai Charm out of Jadine's hand, though, at the Butcher, I would think.
Yeah, I think it's too risky to let this stay in play.
Yeah, she's going to Stoke the Flames right at John, not even taking time to hit Butcher of the Horde. He goes down to 10. One thing Jadine can do here is use her removal spell to leverage against John pretty hard. If he swings with Butcher and doesn't give it lifelink, she can just take the damage. Whereas once he lifelinks it, she can then Stoke or Jeskai Charm it.
It's true. I would just be worried about getting into this sort of... Jadine already is kind of down a point of damage because the token was unable to attack last turn because of the Butcher Hordes in play. So you have to look at that Soak the Flames as closer to 3 damage than 4 damage. And at that point, is it worth, not getting the Butcher off the table when you may be forced to do it anyway? I mean, if he produces 1 creature, the hand could be forced.
Back over on John's side, his play for the turn is going to be a Stormbreath Dragon. And now, you're right, he might just be able to race here. This is 9 points of power.
Well, I imagine Jadine chump blocks here on the Butcher because this token now doesn't really change her clock at all.
Yeah. Well, the Butcher actually has flying, so she's not going to be able to make that block.
That thing has a lot of keywords. Wow.
Yeah, it has flying.
Yeah, it has
flying is the one it gets for
yeah.
free. The other ones are right. It can get Vigilance, Haste, and Lifelink if you sack a creature to it.
So, excuse me. Now I think her hand is forced to use a removal spell on something.
Well, she can't use a removal spell. She can't use Jeskai Charm can only hit Butcher.
Right.
And I don't think she can really Stoke the Flames the dragon either. If she does, John will use the dragon to give Butcher lifelink, which seems pretty backbreaking for Jadine.
Right. And now, this token is still not really adding anything to the board or the clock because John's at 10. So the 4 points of damage in her hand, that adds up to, 8 over the 2 spells, and then the token's only 9, so it's not really any assistance.
John's last card is a Despise, sees a hand of 12 more points of burn. He swings, puts Jadine down to 8, and is going to pass the turn. She puts John to 6. We'll be able to get him down to 5, but maybe 1 point short here.
And this is setting aside that John, if he draws an untapped land, also has the option of monstersing the Stormbreath Dragon. I mean, this is all sorts of bad for Jadine.
Yeah, it's unlikely she'll be able to kill 2 things this turn. You see Mountain the play here. I believe that's her draw.
And if he draws a land, goes monsters with Stormbreath Dragon, she uses a removal spell in response because she has to. Then he can sacrifice to Butcher of the Horde, gains 5, and now the race is completely offset.
Yeah, she can't really afford to take a lifelink hit from Butcher of the Horde at any point in these games.
Yep.
And Jadine may just be 1 point short here. And one thing I want to point out is she's going to be able to get him to 1 and maybe not to 0. And I want to just give compliments to the way that John has built his mana base here. I think a lot of the 3-color decks we've seen this tournament would have dealt at least 1 more point of damage to themselves over the course of this game, which, as we see, would have changed the result.
Look at the lands in play. Only Caves of Koilos had the potential to even do that. He's kept it really clean.
Yeah, only 1 pain land in play, and John never actually had to use it. He took 0 off his own lands, and that turned out to be really relevant.
Yeah. So now we'll see how Jadine wants to respond to this attack that's coming, but the hand is forced. She has to act. And I think she's going to be really hard-pressed to not take a Butcher of the Horde lifelink hit here if John draws an untapped land.
Well, the play she can do right now, she can Jeskai Charm the Butcher this turn, and next turn Stoke the Flames the Dragon. This is all playing around an untapped land. She does that, she's alive. I don't know if she's killing John yet. Well, she actually doesn't have to Stoke the Flames the Dragon if he doesn't have another creature. She can Jeskai Charm the Butcher, take 4, then swing with the token and Stoke the Flames for the remaining points.
Right.
But it all depends on his draw here. Especially, yeah, he doesn't have Stokes in his own deck. His burn spell is Lightning Strike. So an attack here. Jadine's going to Stoke the Flames on the Butcher of the Horde. That leaves Jeskai Charm in her hand. Remember, that card cannot hit Storm Breath Dragon.
Right.
He has protection from white.
But a blocker or removal spell keeps John in this game.
4 mana, and it's another Butcher of the Horde for John.
And I like keeping the Charm in hand at this stage because it's roughly the same thing. But I think Jadine wants to have the option of keeping the cheapest spell in her hand so she can top deck a 2-mana spell and things are good.
Exactly. Looks like her draw for the turn was God's Willing.
And God's Willing is basically the only draw on the deck that punishes her for playing this way because she doesn't have a second white source of mana. So she cannot Charm and God's Willing in the same turn.
You're absolutely right. She only has single white. So if and there you go, game 1 goes to John Goss. You're absolutely right. Just the single white there. If she switches the Jeskai Charm and the Stoke the Flames, she can God's Willing the token past and then cast Stoke the Flames. That is, I'm not, that's certainly 1 out. She only has 2 copies of God's Willing.
And she has 4 copies of Lightning Strike. So in that sense, she's playing the odds. And you can see when, she went to make the move, like she thought that she had it, and then double checked and saw there's only 1 white source of mana in there, and John's able to barely sneak out that first game. Very impressive stuff.
Yeah, well, while these players are sideboarding, we're going to bring you back into the booth for those of you joining us here in Star City Games, New Jersey. We are going to ask you a trivia question during the top 8, top 4, and finals here this morning. And if you believe you know the answer, please tweet the answer with the hashtag SCG Premium at SCG Live, and at the end of the round, we'll announce the winner of our giveaway. For the top 8, we have this question. We're going to talk about Grand Prix Orlando, which is just coming up next week. We've been talking about it for a month or two here, but finally it's going to happen.
So this is, to cut you off real briefly, this is where you're showing some trivia question giving away a little novice.
All right.
Because you both gave away the name of the Grand Prix. That's 1 question we're down.
And
you gave away the date of the Grand Prix. That's the 2nd question we're down.
All right. Well,
but keep going.
No.
All right. Next time.
So first question we're going to start is, what is the format of the Grand Prix? So if you know that, please tweet the answer with hashtag SCG Premium, and at the end of the top 8, we will announce the winner of 3 months.
See, that could have been our 1-year question. The first question
I could have built up to it.
Where are we next weekend for, we have a Grand Prix or whatever, and then the next question.
Where is Grand Prix Orlando?
Where is the Grand Prix?
All right.
Where? Yeah, whatever.
Let's look at the
talk about it off air. Not a big deal.
Let's look at the sideboard here.
Yes, let's.
For both players. Jadine, the card I was really excited about to see during the Swiss is Deflecting Palm. And in a red Rabble-Master mirror, you'd have to think this was one of her best cards.
It's interesting. When I first saw this card in her deck list in the early Swiss rounds, I assumed all that's going on here is you want this for a burn mirror, something where it's just straight racing. She brought it in against mono black aggro. It was great there. She brought it in against some sort of monsters deck. it was great there as well. So I expect it to come in here as well. John's hitting in chunks of 4 and 5. It can be good against Butcher the Horde in a number of respects, so I think that card's going to be coming in.
Other things that she has available, she does have an extra copy of God's Willing and 2 copies of Negate. I'm wondering if you think that's where this fight is. You said that one of John's strategies in this matchup was to cast kill spells at all of her creatures so that she couldn't get repeatable damage. Now, if Jadine also believes that's John's strategy, cards like Negate and God's Willing could be pretty good for her.
Well, it's tough just because her creatures, they aren't very good on turn 5 or turn 6 for the most part. So trying to play one of her creatures with Negate backup, that's kind of a cumbersome plan. I think the fight in this matchup is over John's creatures as well. Butcher the Horde is threatening. Bermaz matches up very nicely against Goblin Rabble-Master. Stormbreath Dragon is hard for her to kill. So I think that she wants to keep her deck as fast as possible and fight over the creatures. So I would not go to Negate, but you are right. There are a ton of good spells in John's deck. It just doesn't feel to me that that's what the fight's over.
So maybe not Negate, but God's Willing seems pretty reasonable.
I think they bring in the extra God's Willing is fine, especially because Titan Strength is not really up to very much in the matchup. That's an easy swap at the minimum.
Sure. On John's side, he's definitely has brought a more controlling sideboard to the table here. Very few extra threats in his deck, but he does have a lot of answers to different things going on. You see the 2 copies of Suspension Field. They could take care of Mantis Rider, but not much else in the matchup. He does have 2 copies of Nyx Fleece Ram, a card that's very good against Rabble-Master and Seeker of the Way, in addition to 3 Magma Sprays, which seem excellent against the same 2 cards.
I don't know how much of the anti-creature stuff John's going to want to bring in because, again, Jadine only has the 12 creatures, but the Nyx Fleece Rams are good no matter what. If she's on a beatdown plan with her creatures, it's going to be good. If she's trying to burn them out, it's going to be good as well. Magma Spray, Anger of the Gods, these cards are all fine, and I think he wants some amount of it, but it's easy to be overloaded on creature removal in the matchup. So we'll see. My instinct is that he probably wants Anger of the Gods, but not Magma Spray, but I could see boarding Magma Spray and not Anger of the Gods. I could see bringing in a mixture of the 2. I would just be dubious of bringing in all 6.
A lot of his removal right now in the main deck, his Crackling Doom and Hero's Downfall, are pretty expensive. So if he wants to lower his curve, he can go for some of those options. But if he does that, he leaves himself open to Mantis Rider.
And having some play at instant speed, as you mentioned, because of Mantis Rider is really nice as well. So
we'll see whether or not he chooses to go for that. And looking also, how do you feel about cards like Stormbreath Dragon in the matchup? They're pretty expensive. You can get away with them because they have haste, but the fight did seem to be over cards like Butcher of the Horde and Rabble-Master.
So a different way to frame this is sort of what are the cards that what are John's inefficient cards in the matchup? I think Despise is on the top of the list. I think Thoughtseize is fine, but not spectacular. I think having 4 copies of Hero's Downfall and 4 copies of Crackling Doom is excessive, given how many creatures Jadine actually brings to the table.
Sure.
I think Sarkhan is okay, but again, a little slow and not really that great in the matchup. So there's already a bunch of cards that I would point to as probably being less efficient than Stormbreath Dragon. So I agree with you. A 5-mana creature that's sort of just about attacking, not ideal in this matchup, but I think John has less efficient tools that he can remove. The Thoughtseize thing I could see you leaving in 1 or 2, but I don't think I would want all 4.
Yeah, certainly we've seen the situation where you end up Thoughtseizing a Jeskai Charm or something that was going to be pointed at your head anyway. And that can be a pretty awkward situation. During the Swiss, we saw a lot of players actually Thoughtseize off Pain lands to take burn spells. And that's at that point, you're hardly making a difference.
Right. It is interesting watching this Jeskai deck in action, though. The play pattern is so reminiscent of the Boros deck from last season, and that's one where when people ask me about speculative decks, what do you think about burn? I said, Boros Charm's out, War Leaders, Helix is out. There's not a deck there anymore. And clearly that is not the case.
Yeah, well, it had to add blue cards. And, I'm a fan of that part of it. I like that you get options. I like that you get options like Negate out of the sideboard now.
Negate's very nice. But the blue cards in this list are hardly blue cards in the classic sense. In Jadine's main deck, it's just Jeskai Charm and Mantis Rider.
Yeah.
Not exactly, you know, counterspell
Yeah,
and morphling.
they're not really. I mean, Jeskai Charm's an instant, so I like that part.
It's true. It's flexible. You could probably, I think you could have fun playing with that card.
Yeah, I think the heavy hitters on John's side here, the cards that really can get a lot of traction is he has the 4 Butcher of the Hordes, and if he ever gets in a lifelink hit with one of those, that's pretty bad for Jadine. On top of that, he has 2 copies of Sorin Solemn Visitor, and if he can get a Sorin Plus and connect with a creature, I think it's going to be equally devastating in the matchup.
It's another element I like a lot about John's deck. There's no explicit life gain going on, but between the Sorin and Butcher of the Horde, he has ways of just suddenly, I'll gain 5, I'll gain 7, these dramatic swings that could occur in these beatdown matchups. Something Jadine has to play around the whole time here.
Right. If John gets to have 25 life instead of 20, you know, at the core, she is a burn deck. That is going to be very tough for her to deal with.
I mean, it's not like she's worried about Burmaz too much. You know, she can handle damage racing, but
Right.
Burmaz definitely makes Sorin super threatening.
Yeah, Burmaz with lifelink is a problem. So we are underway with game 2 here. Both players trading temples just on the first couple turns. Remember, this is all set up. We did see last game Jadine have a turn 2 Seeker of the Way. This game it's just going to be some lands. All right, some updates from the other sides of the bracket is we have Ross Miriam on our backup matchup. He is up a game on Chris Kvartek. Ross is playing Green Devotion with Doomwake Giants. And the winner of that match is going to go on to play Kevin Jones. Kevin Jones is our other Jeskai Tempo player. He had a quick 2-0 victory over Joey Manners, Mono Green Devotion. So Jeskai, once again, showing that it is quite the contender for this event.
And that's the matchup that, speaking to Ross, he was the most concerned about in the elimination rounds, is running in this Jeskai Tempo deck, because he feels like he just doesn't have a quick enough clock. Mantis Rider is really bad for him. They can play a race in a non-interactive way. He's definitely worried about that potential matchup in the semifinals.
I asked him what he thought about it and said he honestly just didn't know. He had never tested against the Jeskai deck, and he really had only thought of it on paper. So he just said he hasn't really played this yet.
Yeah.
Back to Jadine's turn. She's going to crack a fetch land for a basic and get a 3rd land, and that's Mantis Rider on turn 3. Hits John 217.
The unexpected star of the show this weekend, thus far at least. Probably not going to see much of it in the legacy portion, but you never know.
I would say of the rares from cons, this has been our breakout rare of the tournament.
I would say so too.
If you can count commons and uncommons, I would give it to Seeker of the Way.
Yeah, that's fair.
Crackling Doom's going to go ahead and take care of Mantis Rider.
This is also John's first point of pain land damage of the match thus far.
Yeah, John really embracing a control role here, setting up with Temple into finally then playing a duel. Jadine does not look like she has another creature at the moment. She played a Mystic Monastery tapped there.
Well, there's a lot of pressure on John to have something proactive this turn. Even if it's something like Nyx Fleece for him, get on the board. He can't just be sitting here saying go with removal spells in his hand, because Jadine can start.
She'll start burning him out.
Start burning him out.
You see Crackling Doom over on the left there. One of the inclusions in the Mardu control style strategies. An Edict effect that deals 2 to her. Pretty decent at racing.
And John's deck, it fits right in because he wants to play this control and removal game, but also he likes to be able to go on the offensive as well. So it makes sense on a couple levels.
John's play for the turn was Goblin Rabble-Master and was able to attack for 1. Jadine back on her side threw a Jeskai Charm straight at him. So it's going to be a race here. Goblin Rabble-Master is a very difficult card to race, though.
And the synergy that everyone discussed when preview season was rolling around, Goblin Rabble-Master plus Butcher of the Horde, this would not be a bad spot for John to have that card.
Yeah, he swings in for 6 off the 2 tokens and the Rabble-Master. You're right, there's a couple things that Jadine really needs to dodge. Butcher of the Horde would be a big problem there. On top of that, Sorin would be equally bad. Any of these large life gain swings. And John is going to play some of his own life gain, but it's neither of those cards. He's going to play Nyx Fleece Ram. On end step, Jadine throws a Stoke the Flames at him, plays a land, and passes. She's at 10. Did not have 8 more points of burn just in her hand. She didn't have the double charm.
So if John has a lightning strike here, He can Lightning Strike Jadine, and then the Rabble-Master, the 3 tokens plus the Rabble-Master, represents a lethal attack. So I can see that Jadine's just trying to take these shots off of the Rabble-Master and race with burn. But if John's able to add a little bit more, he can actually steal this race.
Well, an uncontested Rabble-Master is just a huge source of damage. If it's 1 on the first turn, but it gets really big from there. It goes from 1 to 6. So on the next turn, it's dealing 8.
Yeah, it is a lot.
And you do see a pair of lightning strikes in John's hand. The first one's going to drop Jadine to 7, and it looks like he's going to have lethal this turn.
Or at least force a removal spell out of Jadine, which is good enough here, because it probably sets off the race too much.
Nyx's Fleece Ram brings John up to 9 life as he draws for the turn. You see a lightning strike at the front here. He has a Rabble-Master, 2 tokens, soon to be a 3rd. She's going to have removal for the Rabble-Master at the very least, and even then, she's at a virtual 1 life point.
Yeah.
See if John has something else to add. He may not even need it.
You can see John not cracking this Bloodstained Mire also until the absolute last moment.
Yeah, John's been very good about preserving his life total in this matchup. But Jadine didn't have the 8 points of damage last turn. He thinks it's unlikely she has him this turn. He's going to go ahead and crack that Bloodstained Mire.
He is, yeah, leaving himself dead to 2 copies of Jeskai Charm, I suppose.
Right, and this was saying Jadine, if they were in her hand, she would have cast them already.
But there is a hypothetical.
Exactly.
Where that fetch land kills him.
Now remember, they have access to deck lists, so the other card he needs to watch out for here is Deflecting Palm.
Oh, yeah.
Jadine does play that. And if he swings the Rabble-Master would swing for 6 here. Deflecting Palm plus any burn spell would get him.
Another place where Butcher the Horde can provide some protection.
Yeah, you can sack the Rabble-Master in response to the Deflecting Palm. And I wonder how many games during the Swiss Jadine was able to really more or less get people with that card. It certainly isn't something you see coming.
Well, I was surprised by it. Both times it happened on camera, and I have the deck list in front of me, so I can't imagine being an opponent in this tournament.
But remember, in top 8, players do have access to their opponent's deck list, so he does know about those cards in her board, and I would think he assumes that they're in her deck.
Yeah, I would guess so as well.
The question for John would be if he can play around Deflecting Palm. He could just swing Goblin tokens, but I don't believe he has enough burn to finish the deal. And there may be the issue that Deflecting Palm is just going to be really good against John no matter how he plays. But right, Butcher does seem to be the safe play for it. He could give Butcher lifelink, and in that case, even if she Deflecting Palms it back at him, he gains life. He doesn't actually take anything.
Yeah. Definitely if he has it, it feels like a lot of insurance here. Looks like he is just going to move into combat.
Move to combat, and he is going to swing the Rabble-Master so that this is a lethal attack here. It's 3 from the Goblins, 5 from the Rabble-Master. That Jadine is at 7, and here is Deflecting Palm. She's going to cast it on the Rabble-Master. So what this means is instead of Jadine taking 5 from the Rabble-Master, it will be John taking 5. So as the board stands now, Jadine will go to 4, John will go to 3 on this attack. And John's going to Lightning Strike his own Rabble-Master in response.
Not surprising. I would imagine John would have not moved into combat without some way to get his Rabble-Master off the table if he could avoid it.
Yeah, so Jadine will go to 4. She didn't burn him on his end step there, just drew a card and passed back the turn. The Deflecting Palm bought her an extra draw there, but it doesn't look like she hit the burn she needed off it.
Yeah. Although her hand could also just be a little bit chunky. You know, it could be a lot of the 4 damage spells, Stoke the Flames, and so forth.
Nyx's Fleece Ram puts John up to a very relevant 9th life point. He's going to swing with 3 tokens. This will put Jadine down to 1. And she has no response here. Can John deal the last point in burn? We'll see. And it's Crackling Doom. That's 2 damage to her. And she's going to negate the Crackling Doom.
Okay.
So she gets to stay alive for 1 more turn. Is there an end-step burn spell from her? No, there is not. And there you go. Without the way to deal with the Goblin tokens and not a points of burn, it's John Goss 2-0 who's going to move on to the semifinals.
A matchup that I thought overall was fairly solid for John. Game 1 was definitely scary. I mean, that's just what Jadine's deck is capable of doing. But I think that if he's able to keep his life total relatively high, which he can do with the removal spells on Jadine's creatures, his mana base is pretty well suited for the matchup. And then his 4s and 5s are just so powerful.
Yeah, we did see game 1. He had a lot. He does have a lot of cards that are very well positioned in the matchup.